I love it. All right. So, let me record to the cloud. I want to make sure I record all of this. And hello to everybody that is tuning in for our fifth episode of Teacher Talk, sponsored by the Falcon Feathers. That stands for Future Educators in the Arts, Transforming Human Experience and Realities. It's a wonderful acronym. And I'm so grateful to be airing another episode with the one and only extraordinary, magnanimous Cody Raven Morris, who must always be introduced with all three names. It's a requirement.
Thank you.
It's so amazing to be speaking with her and seeing her beautiful face. This is a very dear friend of mine that I love and I have missed. She has been out of Texas longer than I have, and she's going to tell us what she's been up to now that she is a master of the choral conducting. I'm so excited to hear about her journey and what she's been going through and to share some of her wisdom with all of you. For those of you that might be tuning in that don't know me, my name is Christopher Hansen. I am the Director of Music Education and Orchestral Activities at Seattle Pacific University. Go Falcons. And very grateful to be serving in this capacity and working with future educators. I taught in public school for 8 years in Central Texas and was a graduate student before that, and then an undergraduate student before that, studying music education and other things. And so today we are going to talk about two things that immediately come to my mind when I think of Cody, and that is transitioning from the public school classroom into graduate school. I know that a lot of my students at SPU have been thinking about going to grad school right away after finishing their bachelor's degree. I have friends that are teaching in the field that are curious about what master's degrees look like and if you should do it in conducting or if you should do it in music education or what options you have. I had a unique journey and I went straight from my undergrad into grad school. I did not start teaching until after I left grad school, but Cody had the unique opportunity to teach right after she finished her undergraduate degree and then made the decision to transition to grad school. So I'm excited to have that conversation, especially since we've had different experiences with it, and hopefully inspire or share some commonalities with your story and what you might be thinking about. And then with the time we have, we're going to be talking about concepts of diversity and equity in music and education. And again, I think we both have shared a lot of stories and experiences on that topic and have unique perspectives on what it means and how it is going right now in the 21st century, where it's been, and then hopefully where it is going to be in the years to come, especially with COVID-19 and how it's affected us in terms of equity and diversity and how it's affecting different communities and populations in different ways. It's a really rich conversation to have. So I want to start with a prayer. I have the unique opportunity to be at Seattle Pacific University, which is a private liberal arts institution that has a Christian identity. And so I like to start these with a quick prayer. And however you like to participate, if this is something you're just listening to, or if you'd like to bow your head, or if you want to join me, however you participate in prayer, I just appreciate this opportunity to lift this time that we have together to God and to thank Him for this as an opportunity to grow and learn from each other. Dear Lord, thank you for this day. Thank you for the opportunity to connect, for the blessing that technology is to keep us connected in a time that we must appropriately distance ourselves physically. God, I pray for everyone that is battling these illnesses, everyone that is battling personal strife in this time of social distancing. I am so grateful for the friends and colleagues that you have blessed me with, particularly Cody, and the wisdom that she has to share with everyone that will watch this. Thank you again and again for the resources you provide us and the time that you give us to connect with one another. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. So, Cody, I'm so fortunate to know a lot about you, but if you wouldn't mind, tell everyone that's watching and going to be watching this a little bit about yourself, particularly, you matriculated through Texas State University and what you were studying there, where you taught, how long you taught, and then going into grad school. Like I said, I know all those things, but I want everybody to have a little bit of your background if you would let us know where you're coming from, what you're doing.
Well, hello, everyone. I am a chatter, first and foremost. I should say that. So I'll give you some bullet points, and then the blessing of me knowing Chris is that he can pry for some more detail if I don't get to it. But if I give you full stories, we'll be here all day, and this could be the start of a very exciting docu-series that we can have together. But starting with my collegiate experience, I'm a proud Texas State Bobcat. got my undergrad in music education there. It's actually a bachelor in music with a teacher certification. A lot of people don't understand how that actually works. And we take the exams that we take after the CPR and EC12. I am certified to teach elementary through high school music education. And I knew that I wanted to be a high school choir teacher, not for any reason other than those were the problems I knew how to deal with. And I felt like I was the best at dealing with them, because there needs to be great teachers at all levels. But there are events and content that happens at the 9th through 12th grade level that I was all about. But that's actually that's not how my journey into education began. I was not the best student. That is not a secret by any means, and I'm not ashamed to say that. I enjoyed the social life. I enjoyed it thoroughly, and I enjoyed being involved in different things. And I didn't really prioritize my academic self until I got a bit older in the program. But I always loved an adventure. And so my first step into education was when I was in block observation at Seguin High School. If you don't know what that is, it was actually a semester that Texas State had before student teaching, so that you're observing a teacher and you are taking notes and doing projects. And the other half of the week, you're on campus with a general ed teacher who's helping you with school law, helping you understand unit planning and lesson planning, so on and so forth. And I will never forget the day.
Cody, forgive me. I'm so sorry, because I don't want to interrupt you, but I was going to clarify for a lot of people that are watching, because this is totally new for me being in the Pacific Northwest. I see a few of my students chimed in. I'm so glad to see you, Colin, and other people that are here. Mario sending us some love. One of my previous colleagues, a good friend of ours, Mario Contreras. Thank you guys for watching. And I definitely want to let Cody talk, but just to clarify, for people in the Pacific Northwest, Texas is a K through 12 general certification. So it doesn't have endorsements like the state of Washington and other states. So even though Cody focused in on choral education, her certification, as my certification was, is K through 12 general music. So you are certified to teach all subjects, but as is the tradition, even when you're studying as an undergrad, you usually have a focus or some sort of an emphasis. So she really did focus on secondary choral education. I focused on secondary instrumental education, specifically orchestra. I mean, it really gets that specific. And your degree program will be set up to serve that, even though the certification that you attain, technically, right, this is the conversation always happens in Texas, like technically you can teach everything, but I had no business being in an elementary school classroom. So like I knew I wanted to teach secondary instrumental ed. I knew that was my calling. Cody wanted to do choral. And I, just as a point of clarification, because a lot of the programs, Texas on a semester system, in the Pacific Northwest we use quarters, so that's a little different. And the degree at SPU is unique because they fit everything into 4 years. They're very adamant about that. But at Texas State, it's usually 9 semesters or a full 5th year. Did you do a full 5th year with the student teaching in the block?
Yes, it took me 5.5, just because there was a turn-up recovery, as I like to call it. But I was on a 5-year degree plan. I do have colleagues, one of them who has logged in to watch this, who finished in 4 years,
which is crazy.
Right, I was a diehard camp worker, and I worked. Well, by the time I graduated from Texas State, I lived on campus through the summer because I did piano, choir, band, and orchestra. We did all of those, just like boom, 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 boom in a row. If you were taking summer classes, it was possible to get done in 4 years successfully. But that wasn't my intention. Camps are extremely important to me. And they're a massive part of why I was even able to go to college and making that path for me. And I still utilize it as something for students to this day. So that's why I chose to take that longer route. I have no regret.
Please forgive me, I didn't mean to interrupt, but just so that you guys know the context of how her certification worked. And so you were telling us about that student teaching experience in Seguin and being there.
So it was actually the block observation before student teaching. And myself, Dr. Joey Martin and Dr. Lynn Brinkmeyer, we were at lunch at our state conference at TMEA this past February. We were revisiting this story. And how I was a bit, my words, not theirs, my words, I was a bit of a brat. I was looking at my colleagues, to my peers, and the placements that they had in student teaching. And I was like, well, why aren't I at the really big school in San Antonio? And why don't I get to go here? I did such and such a thing. And I'm like, well, Cody, not all programs are equal, and everyone should have experiences of different programs, no matter what the size, no matter who the teacher is, like just go to learn. And the teacher there was a beautiful human. She just was not familiar with teaching public ed, and she had come from the collegiate level. And me and this teacher bonded over tragedy. Well, let's skip ahead to, I remember the day that Dr. Shaban coughed, and I was like, "Ew, that's gross." And she was like, "Yeah, that's gross." And we just laughed because we were diehard people who just worked through illness. And 2 weeks later, after this slow downfall of me subbing for her classes and going on spring break, and then she was hospitalized, she actually died of H1N1, of what is also known as swine flu. So I was 21, I think at the time, 21 going on, no, I had just turned 22. And I became the head director at Seguin High School in Seguin, Texas, while I was still taking 9 course hours, and I would drop a class. And so it was crazy. I went from teaching there for a semester to teaching middle school theater. I say that to say it's always important when I tell people that, because I think a lot of people look at the stuff that I do now and the amazing educators that I'm blessed to be friends with and know, and that includes you, Chris, and that fellowship of people I get to talk to. And they're like, "How'd you get here?" And I'm like, "I got here through trial and fire and mistakes. And the first job wasn't the dream job, nor is it for anybody. I mean, it was life. Yeah. I experienced life, and you pick up lessons along the way, and kids teach you things that a textbook could never could. Learning from other teachers in the classroom, like that's the more authentic experience. So after going from Seguin to middle school theater, and then I taught a year at Lehman High School in Kyle, Texas, I would find myself saying, I need to get out of this area. And I went to North Shore Senior High in Houston, where I was there for 5 years. And
which is a big transition, just for people that don't know. I mean, everybody knows I was born and raised in Texas. Obviously, I love my home state. But just the context surrounding that Central Texas and the Hill Country, which Lehman and Seguin and all that would have been, it's hard. You can't call it a small town because it's not like a small town in Minnesota or something. I mean, these are large cities, but the politics and the culture around it is still small town. And so it's very surreal, especially if because you've come from larger cities and lived in larger cities. So if you go there, and then you go somewhere like North Shore, which is north of Houston, and Houston is one of the biggest metroplexes in the country, let alone the world, actually, that's a huge shift. So for Cody to say, like, yeah, I taught in Central Texas and I decided to move somewhere else in the state, it's like another country. I mean, to go from Central Texas over to Houston, because I went from Houston to Central Texas. Yeah. So it's very different. And I have to quick shout out to some of the people that are watching. Matthew Moreno, so good to see you. Victor Cavazos and Scott Lipscomb. Jordan Meister, these are amazing people. Nick Uarte, so good to see you guys. And a huge special shout out to our very dear friend Josh Contreras. Happy birthday, sir. So happy for you. So happy for you. And I love watching all of your knitting sessions, and I love everything that you're creating. It's so awesome. So thank you guys for watching. For those of you that are just joining us, we're talking to Cody, and she's given us sort of this history of where she's been and the transition she's made in her career and her professional life. I'm so glad she's telling us about it. So forgive me for keep interrupting. Please keep going.
No, it gives me a dance break. Like you talk and like you say cool words. I'm like, ooh, yes. Tell them, Chris. Make the shout outs, birthday shout outs, collegiate shout outs. I love it. Brotherhood shout outs.
Boom.
Oh, boom. All right. Back at it. Where was I? So
North Shore.
I was giggling when you were talking about the Metroplex versus Central Texas. In the job interviews that I had post Lehman, the biggest factor of why I chose North Shore, and I genuinely am laughing because this was a very cute sentiment that I was wrong about that would lead me into the best place that I've been in my career so far, was I said, I'm going to go from being a head director at Lehman and I'm going to choose to be an assistant at North Shore, which was not, I didn't walk into that like, oh, this is perfect. When I realized exactly what the job entailed, that was primarily going to be a 9th grade campus teacher. And remember, I mean, these schools are huge. I walked in knowing that North Shore had over 4,000 students in the program or at the high school. So I was like, well, if I'm the ninth grade campus teacher, it's like my campus, my program within this bigger conglomerate, for lack of a better word. And my actual train of thought, I remember calling another job and saying, this is the best decision for me because I'm going to have less students than I had when I was at Lehman. So to give me a chance to take a step back, this was the actual train of thought I had. It's going to give me a chance to take a step back, and like really learn from another mentor and not have as much on my plate. I taught more kids at North Shore as the second assistant than I would have at any program that I previously had.
As we like to say in Texas, bless your heart.
Bless my heart. It was crazy. So I walked into North Shore and they were at about 350 kids. And predominantly they were freshmen. It's like a pyramid on up and freshmen on the bottom. And then of course they get older and they find other things they like and they start to, focus in by the time they're seniors. By my third year there of 5 years, we opened the school year with 550 kids in choir.
Yeah.
And that was a lot. I'm not saying that as a goal in mind, because there were a lot of issues with that number, and we settled around 470.
Well, and I think it's always important to contextualize that because, again, when I moved up to the Pacific Northwest, like it was a huge culture shock being born and raised in Texas and only seeing Texas education, let alone music education. California, New York, Texas, Florida, all have really unique cultures around music and education. And a lot of it stems from tax dollars and how the legislature organizes things. So I'm not going to geek out on that, but there are really specific reasons that the music programs look a certain way. And one of the things that was a big culture shock coming up here is that the schools are smaller. If a high school gets more than 2,500 students, they build a new school. And I'm like, that's a middle school. That's a small middle school in Texas. But geographically, right, sociologically, because Texas is so big, you only have one high school and everybody's got to get bussed in. So it's this balance of how things are just culturally different.
Yeah.
And it was something that was weird to me because, like, I had a small program. When I was at San Marcos High School, my numbers at the high school had just broken 80. So I had about 80 high school students at the high school. And we had roughly, it was a big swing between Goodnight Middle School and Miller Middle School, but there'd be about 80 to 100 at each of the middle schools. And statistically speaking, like, we were holding our retention rates and we engaged about 5% of the total population on each campus. And like, that was the goal. And those are the numbers in orchestra that you see all over the country. If a music program can be representative of 8 to 10% of the student population, we consider that successful. But I mean, like, statistically speaking, that's actually a really small population of like the overall campus compared to there's athletics and all of this and like student engagement with the arts. And so it's always really deceptive because when I talk to people about programs and in Washington, they'll say like, yeah, the program's huge. They almost have 200 kids. And to me, I'm like, that's a medium-sized program. But then when you think, okay, well, that whole campus only has about 1,800 kids. And I'm like, you have more than 10% of the student population in your program. That's a big deal.
Yes,
That's a total culture shift in terms of how your program is perceived on campus. And so when you talk about those numbers, number one, it's huge. And North Shore, like, choir program is a beast in like mad respect. Like, it's an amazing program.
Yes.
But it's always important, I think, to contextualize it because you guys had reached about that 10% mark, which is very successful in terms of a public school arts program. But I think it's deceptive because if you go to a smaller school and you're like, yeah, we had, gotten over 500 kids in choir, and it's like, you mean that 25% of the school population was in? I was like, no, it was about 10% of the school population because when I graduated from Elsick High School, shout out to A-Leaf, Texas, what's up with the SWAT? So we had almost 6,000 students at my high school. I mean, like, my graduating class had 1,200 people in it. And I see some of my alum, shout out again, SWAT, Southwest A-Leaf, Texas, some alum that are watching, like, it was huge. I mean, we just had a massive high school. So it was weird because I look back at it and I think, yeah, the orchestra was really big, but in context to the student population, the orchestra was tiny.
Right.
You know, like that. So just contextualizing that, because I know I have some of my students from SPU watching and probably thinking like, oh my gosh, 500 plus kids registered for choir. Like
Right.
one out of every 4 kids on campus was in choir. And I'm like, no, not necessarily. Those numbers are still massive and impressive and insane to think that schools in general with one choir director, 2, 3 choir directors are, you know, dealing with that many kids. It's huge
It's
that's
insane.
happening.
It's very hard. You
But
know, and
it's so crazy across the country how those numbers, what they mean. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Like what it
yeah.
means in terms of what you're doing with the program. So,
Because I will say I went to Anderson High School in Austin, and my director from there, Patrick Dill, who's now at Cullen on the East Coast, he was the lone choir director there. My graduating class had 525 kids in it. My graduating class, we had over 200 kids in choir, and I know when we got around 220, I don't know, that number sticks in my head. I mean, he was clawing for an assistant. And it wasn't, there are some people, I know I can speak on behalf of Texas.
yeah.
I know there are teachers with over 200, pushing 300, if not more kids, and they're by themselves.
Yep.
And they're still advocating to get consistent. And just from what I saw from my high school director, it wasn't even about the kids. It's anytime there is talent, anytime there's talent, and you thrive. And I think that's just that's not a Texas thing so much as it is an education thing. Remember that education, like everything else, is a business. And the hard thing with the business, which looks like a blessing, but it has its own backfiring, is that the better you get, the more people are going to want from you.
Yeah.
And so the real reason why people are advocating to have someone else in their classroom is not just because it has nothing to do with wanting to do less work. It's because the beast in front of them, the creation that they have made, is getting so big that one person can't possibly handle it, keep their sanity outside of the school bell hours, you know? So that controlling the growth of a program is also an art. And that's what we discovered when we hit 550, was that we literally did not have the infrastructure to have that many kids in choir. So what do we do now? And I never thought it was going to be something I was going to have to work on, but I had to work on finding other students' gifts.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like, okay, if you really want to be here, we can make this work. But if this is not where you want to be, if this is not the calling, and I mean, it didn't happen overnight. We're talking about the course of a semester. We were helping kids find, your blessing is actually in theater. Your blessing is actually more over here. It's over here, blah, blah, blah. And some of them came back.
Yeah.
It was a huge number to start. We did drop significantly, and then we settled in. But it was manageable amongst the three of us. And we found a way to make that work. So it was, of the 5 years that I was there, it was at the end of year 3 that I knew that I wanted the master's, but I did not leave until 2 years later. And I am very happy that I remember exactly where I was and the rehearsal I was in. I was actually with my chamber choir, and we were doing the Ave Verum Corpus by Bird.
Nice.
And I'm like, it's a Bird bop. Like, come on, this is hard. You know, I went to Texas State, I was in chorale, I was in chamber, an Olive Book of Libre, you know, like.
Shout out Joey Martin.
Yeah, Joey Martin, Jonathan Baptist. You know, I'm killing it, right? I can read anything, but I didn't know how to teach anything. And it was a very humbling moment, because here's year 3, the juniors in chamber choir were my freshmen. I taught you how to read. They also learned how to read from fantastic middle school directors. I'm like, I'm your teacher. You know, like, I put in these high school fundamental things in your spirit. So to have them 2 years later, after they've also made wind ensemble and band, and they've gone off and excelled in other different departments, to have them in front of me and ask me questions that I know the answers are located in a music lit class with Dr. Martin that I may have not listened to 100%, or I may have not taken thorough notes on, or like, okay, I remember how sonata form works, but I'm just having this little gap. And when you teach a certain level, I was primarily teaching 9th graders. Those skills, I wasn't utilizing that knowledge every day.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that happens to a lot of teachers who teach for 2, 3, whatever plus years. They feel this is not accurate, but they feel this musician like insignificance, if that makes sense. Like,
yes.
They're not adequately enough of a musician. So then they're debating on going back, but they don't think they have the skills to go back, but you just haven't been practicing those skills. It's a sink or swim, use it or lose it sort of a thing. And I just wanted to refine those skills so that I could pull that information off of my head, or at least know where to go. And I had a very close mentor to me even say, well, why would you go to grad school when you're surrounded by all these intelligent people? Like, you know who to call. You can call up so and so and so and so to get the information that you want. But I wanted it. I didn't want to have to rely on someone else.
And this is I really do. I always hesitate having this conversation because I feel like I just look like, this pretentious scholar or something that's like, well, I can look from on high and, evaluate the problems and tell you what it is because I read an article on it. But having like lived through, and I really do choose the words intentionally, like survived teaching public school because I had an intense journey in public school. I always refer to it as being in the trenches. And I make this joke, even though it's not really a joke, that my memoirs later in life will be entitled, I hate my job, I love what I do. Because
Ooh.
the job of being a public school teacher, and notice for everybody listening, I'm saying being a public school teacher, doesn't matter what subject you're teaching, the job of being in public education is just brutal. And it really doesn't matter where you are. The infrastructure for public education in the United States, as Cody already pointed out, it is a business. It literally had its birth during the Industrial Revolution. It is a business model. And we all suffer that. Students, administrators, teachers, parents, communities, we all suffer that. It is not the best way to learn. It is not the best model. But we've inherited it from generation to generation. So without going down that rabbit hole, that was something that you said that really tipped off to me. It is a business model, and it is not the best model. And some people have really unprecedented success with it in spite of the structures we have to operate in. But it is something that I think is specific to America. I've been so blessed to start to make connections outside of the country and like meet new friends and colleagues. And it doesn't look this way around the world. Like, it is unique. The number of kids we put in the program and the way we structure the programs. And I bring all of that up to tie into your point about making that transition to grad school and wanting more knowledge. It was, and I'm going to tell on myself, this is a humble moment for me. I didn't get into any of the universities I applied for when I left high school. I was a first generation college student. Shout out First Gen. Loved being able to go to college. It was a transformative experience in my life. Went to college, and when I went into my undergrad, I thought, I'm changing things because I was a crappy high school student, failed a ton of classes, obsessed with orchestra. That's all I did with my life was extracurriculars. I'm going to buckle down. I'm going to learn. I'm going to know my content. And I went through 4 years of my undergrad, took every music class possible, and I really felt confident about the content. But it was so striking to me that I got to my fourth year and was going to get ready to start student teaching. And I was like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to be here another year. And there's so much more I want to learn, but I have literally met the requirements. Like, I took that class. The registrar is not going to let me take it again. I've done everything I can do. And that wasn't a discredit to my institution. I mean, I'm a very proud Texas Southern Tiger. Like, I love my undergraduate institution, but the faculty were telling me, like, you've met the requirements. It's time to go. You're done.
Yeah.
Like, you can check all the boxes. You've taken all the classes. You have all the credits. I don't even remember. I ended up graduating with like 180 credits or something stupid. I took summer school and regular school. I had like 20 to 23 credits every semester. I was obsessed with school. It's all that I did. So I took all these. I was in vocal jazz, and I videoed the marching band, and in orchestra, and in choir, and like I just did all of it because I was obsessed with it. And when I got to that fourth year, I had a similar issue, and then I was like, but I want to know more. I'm not ready to go teach. I had been working in after-school programs. I knew how hard it was to teach in public school, and I was like, I'm not going to do that to myself. Like, I'm not ready for that. And so I went to grad school, and then had a similar experience where I was doing these things and meeting all the requirements, but then I'd get to the end of the degree and it was like, well, you did it. You took all the classes and now you're done. I was like, but I'm not ready yet. I mean, and it took me a long time to realize okay, I feel like I have mastered this content. I feel like I have a grasp of the content. And so then I bring this up, forgive me for being long-winded, but I bring this up because I had what I think was the opposite experience is I walked into the classroom confident. I am a musician. I had been gigging for years at that point as a professional violinist. I had done all these like CDs and all this cool stuff, and I was like, I am a musician and I'm ready to make other musicians. And then I walked in the classroom, and forgive me on a Sunday, but this is the best way to put it. I knew shit about education. I knew nothing. And I had taken all the classes and read all the books, but going into the classroom, I had this huge realization that you can be a musician, you can have the musical content knowledge and skills. That does not mean you can teach. And I say this with the utmost respect. I have known extraordinary musicians in my life. I've been fortunate to work with incredible musicians who will tell you I should not teach. I am not a teacher. Vice versa, and this is taboo, people don't like to admit it. I know I have worked with some of the most extraordinary educators that could teach someone how to transcend their skills and abilities beyond anyone else that are not great musicians. They're
So
not
that
great
was
musicians.
an aspect that I argued to some very important people now still MENC.
Yeah.
And I remember going to my first national conference and literally having an argument with someone who I'm pretty sure was like on the exec board, saying, I wouldn't want my kids to learn from somebody who couldn't sing. So da 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 da. And you're like, well, there are great educators, who can do this. And 19-year-old me wasn't buying it, which of course I knew everything then, just like I know everything now. Just kidding. Just kidding. But I was committed to that. So the irony in this, because we love a good God joke, right? We love a good joke from our Lord. I would start teaching, and I had this like narrative that I had created with my students about my allergies. Like, oh, every blue moon, my allergies get really bad and I lose my eye vowels. I was just WebMDing my way through education, pretty much. I was that person. I pray that Ezra Bartz doesn't look at this, but if he does, he has permission to laugh. I here's piano 1 and 2, and I'm like, I don't need to know how to play, because my first job, I'm going to work in Plano, and I'm going to have someone that's going to play for me, and
A professional
I won't need to
accompanist.
play.
They'll just be
I'll
there.
just have my full-time accompanist. Here's me in piano 3, like when you have that reality check, right? So that's I want to pause there, because part of education being a business is, I think that there is a setup for the person, the potential educator, and there's a Band-Aid that's ripped off. It's ripped off quickly and almost in secret, that it's always been a business, but most educators have this epiphany that they want to do this because of a beautiful, almost nostalgic kind of PBS surreal experience that they had in a classroom. They had a magical moment in a classroom that did not include entering a Form 1 or getting buses requested or losing days to testing or sticking a form outside of the classroom door to make sure kids are all there.
Amen.
Or Zoom meetings, or like it takes away the business aspect. And so I think a lot of undergraduates and first year teachers, they struggle because it's like, when was I supposed to know it was like this? The passion is a beautiful thing, but passion doesn't, that's a rough statement. I was going to say passion alone does not pay bills, right? Passion plus work ethic gets us, that's the whole concept of grit theory, is to find what you love, right? And then to know how to utilize it in order to make a career or to make a business. That being said, there were a lot of elements that I just didn't really understand and I didn't buy fully into, including that I had to have a certain amount of skills. Like I had to check off all the boxes in the work ethic. And part of that was my piano skills, and I didn't really check that off at all. I'm just going to sing everything. So I'm making these excuses for why certain things aren't being produced, but it's okay because I sing loud and I sing big and I sing pretty. And I got to North Shore fall, let me do the math, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Fall of 2013, I started at North Shore. And I really want to prove myself. So thus begins the pattern of we're modeling, we're singing, we're doing sectionals on a Monday. By Wednesday, my voice sounds really rough. By Friday, I can't even phonate and speak. And it would be on October 30th of 2013. that I would go to the ENT after spending a lot of money at an allergist to see if that's the reason why my voice is shot. And they're like, you had a sinus infection, the sinus infection is gone. You had this, you had that. That's not the case at all. And I had vocal nodes, and I knew enough. I had taken the pedagogy. I knew that's what it was. But the big reveal for me was when they did the scoping. The doctor, Dr. Stastny, who's now retired in Houston, great doctor, he said, you actually have a active polyp that's rubbing against the scar of a node. Wow. And that's what, yeah. And I was like, what does that mean? And he goes, that means that based on size, shape, and color, you've had nodes for like 7 years. So I had nodes when I was 14 years old. I did my entire undergrad, senior recital, all the ensembles, auditions with this stuff going on. And I just blamed it on extreme allergies. Yeah. But I wasn't part of being a great educator is taking care of yourself in all the boxes.
Say that again. Yeah. Say that again.
Every aspect of it. And so I went in, I asked him, what should I do? And he said, quit your job. The only way you're going to heal is quit your job unless you figure out a way to not sing, unless you figure a way to not do this. So I got in the car and I cried the whole way there because I realized that I really did love being a singer. That was a part of me as an educator. And I wanted those things to live in a duality and not be separate from each other. But I'm in this position where I have to prove to myself, wait a minute, am I a good teacher? And that began my development of like, anytime I run into a conflict in education, I think to myself, well, Cody, how good are you? Mm-hmm. And if you don't have the skills, find someone who does, ask their advice or ask for their help, but don't just sit here and wallow, right? And I went in and I was actually in the middle of a vocal health unit with kids, and I put in the DVD and they're like, that's you. I'm like, that's me. And we looked at my scoping together. Wow. And I just cried in front of my freshman girls, which was the graduating class of 2017. And I said, I don't know what I'm going to do because I don't want to quit my job, but I want to sing again. And those girls, those 50 girls were the best nurses I ever had in my life. And they forced me to learn how to play. Yeah. They're like, you just have to figure out a different way to teach us. My ear training skills went through the roof. Yeah. And not just me, with the help of the wonderful middle school feeders that I had, with the help of my colleagues that I was working with. I just went and I observed and I was like, I just have to soak in as much stuff as possible around me to figure out how to teach these kids without modeling. And our scores, that year at contest, I will say that they got ones in sight reading, but all three ensembles that I took to UIL that year, and it was my second year teaching, didn't come back with sweepstakes. And then I was determined. I was like really hungry. They got 2s on stage. And I think it's because I couldn't model for them. And I didn't have enough people or examples of what I wanted them to sound like, considering that I couldn't sing. But then it like changed my teaching philosophy of how I want to go about doing something. You can't just sing at kids and make 50 versions of you. Like that, you can't just play for people and expect for that to happen. It's a way, but it's not the only way.
See, you're ringing all my bells because when I started this year, because I'm in my first year, and I had the opportunity, I had to teach these technique courses, like the instrumental technique courses and everything. And I came in and I remember it was this big culture shock. And this was, coming from the classroom, which I think is a unique experience. A lot of people that transition to teaching higher ed are usually coming from their PhD program or their DMA program. So I closed the door to my office at San Marcos High School and then walked onto a college campus to start talking to future educators. And it was this huge issue because we were teaching string methods. So I'm like, here's my wheelhouse, right? Like I am an orchestra director. I can totally do this. And I totally diminished the significance of learning how to play the instrument. That was barely 20% of the coursework. The rest of it was looking at method books and learning how to analyze method books and choose methods and teach other people all this. And there was a huge backlash from the students of like, well, when am I going to learn how to play the instrument? When am I going to learn? I was like, you're going to learn how to do that when you need to learn how to do it. Like number one, we're on a quarter system. We have 10 weeks. No one learns how to play a string instrument in 10 weeks. Mm-hmm. No one. Mozart didn't learn how to do it in 10 weeks. Right? Mm-hmm. Like it's not possible. Right. But I can show you how to teach these instruments in a 10-week period. We can start that conversation. And one of the students like got really flustered one day, and I really I empathized with them because I went through this too, where they go exact words, well, how am I supposed to model this? And I kind of looked at them like they were crazy because I'd been talking about all these like theories of knowing and learning and all this stuff. And I went, let me ask you a question. Is there more than one way of learning? And like based off the stuff we've been doing, because they're like, well, of course, right? I've been ramming that down their throat the whole time. That there are all these different ways, different theories of how we engage, how the human brain works and processes information. It's visual, kinesthetic, auditory, like all these different ways of bringing in information into our brains and how we process it. So I was like, you could say that. They're like, yeah, of course, we know there's more than one way of learning. I said, that means there's more than one way of teaching.
Right.
And if your mode of teaching is modeling, you have to start looking past that, because there are going to be students that you could play in their face. It means nothing to them. It doesn't mean anything to them. It's not how their brain works.
Yeah.
And you are not teaching at that point. You're performing. And that was the first 3 years of my career was playing at kids. It should sound like this. But I didn't really, and I should add the caveat, as you know, like I was a non-traditional certification. So I didn't have student teaching or anything. That was one of the reasons I can say with confidence I knew nothing about education, because I went from being a professional musician to just walking into a classroom, and the state of Texas allows you to do that. They call you highly qualified, because I had a graduate degree in music. And here I walk in the classroom, I could play anything. I could talk about it with a modicum of pedagogy because I'd had a private studio that I was running out of my house. But having 15 kids sit in front of me, and I'm trying to teach violin, viola, cello, and bass at the same time, and I have a kid that's got an IEP or it's got a 504, and he is absolutely a visual learner, not kinesthetic. So me moving his bow arm and me doing all this, like that's when I learned, oh, I have to be able to teach. I have to understand pedagogy and education. And as you pointed out, what does it mean to fill out the forms, and what it means when I lose days to testing, and how to actually plan my year so that it's effective and I don't front load it or overload the kids during contest season or whatever it is. I mean, it took, and all the research says this took 3 years. And I tell people all the time, I said, my first 3 years of teaching were where I learned how to be a teacher.
Yes.
And I was always a musician. I had trained to be a musician, but it fascinates me because I have learned to have so much more respect for the people that feel, well, I feel like I'm a good educator, but I don't know that I'm a musician. And I say, but your job is to be an educator. You can be a musician. I don't think you have to choose. I really don't think you have to choose. But people that carry that guilt with them of, well, I used to play, or I used to this. I'm like, no, you did something in a season that you were required to do. Like you did something in context, but you are an educator. You didn't get hired to be a professional, cello player. You got hired to teach. But this idea that you can just be a musician, and I use those terms intentionally, that you are just a musician, and therefore you can go in and run a music program, I find that insulting. I just find it so insulting.
Fight me. I will fight you on that one. I will say, coming out of this master's, or shall I say going into it, I did make it a priority to get back into voice lessons. I was like, this is of the utmost importance to me, because I wanted to make sure that I had a vocal coach that served almost like a vocal therapist.
Yeah.
Because I knew it was going to be a lot. I knew that part of the requirement for my degree, if you don't know, I am a proud almost graduate. It's almost official next weekend from Michigan State University, and oral exams are done and passed and all that good stuff. But go green. And we're very happy that we made this choice. Now coming into here, I wanted a vocal coach.
And so everybody knows it was a master's in choral conducting, correct?
Yeah. So it's a choral conducting. There's master's in music, choral conducting. That's what it is. Okay. And here I'm studying with Jonathan Reed and David Rail and Sandra Snell. So very happy. Right. Anyways, it's crazy. It's hard. Super hard. But so that was my purpose coming into it. And I actually remember, I have a video that I will not share of me in the practice room when I first got to campus, because I wanted to know that I had a before and after, like what happened of 2 years being back in voice lessons.
Yeah.
You can ask anyone that is in my department like a grad student in conducting, that at the end of every semester, I said I was going to quit voice lessons. It's like, this is not required of my degree. I don't have to be here. This is too much roll off, because I wanted to have the experience that I asked for. And I didn't realize that me getting back in voice lessons meant that I really did have to tap into the part of me that was an artist, that was a performer, that she wasn't just going to scope me every week and be like, everything's healthy and you're fine. Go back to the 3 or 4 ensembles that you like to sing in. Yeah. And I love singing in choir. I made it a priority that when I move, to the next job, that I will search for an ensemble to sing in to continue working on my voice. But I didn't think that I was going to have to do juries again. I didn't think, like, here I am, I'm 32, and I'm like, what am I doing on a stage performing for a panel, and why am I nervous? And there was a part of me, this is a little bit of not an argument, but in opposition of something that you said. There was a part of me in education after the nodules had healed, the polyp had healed. I was silent I didn't sing for 6 months. The ENT said, if I can get away with not singing for a month, I would be fine. He said, if you could rest your voice for 30 minutes a day, you'd be great. But I did it 30 minutes every class period. And I learned how to teach using Bitmojis and emojis and PowerPoints. Like, I was on it, right? So the voice healed, but there was a part of me that was genuinely afraid to sing. I learned that I carried all my tension in my throat. And so I could be quiet. And if a class walked in that made me stressed, I would not have a voice by the end of the class. I could be silent for 45 minutes and still lose my throat because I was just squeezing on my vocal mechanism. Yeah. And so I go back into grad school, and here's someone telling me that I need to do juries, I need to memorize this repertoire. And it was the hardest transition. It was one of the things that made the transition hard, because it made me have to look internally at myself as an educator. And I realized I had genuinely let singer Cody go. I was like, I guess I'm just done with that part of my life. Yeah. And it's okay, because I have these other outlets. I DJ, I'm an educator. I know how to create sound. I can model just enough to be impressive, but not long enough to have to sing a whole piece. Like that, everything was just out of whack. And I could talk about it. And if I were to go back almost 10 plus years to that conversation I had with that person at NAFME, I never thought I was going to be in this situation where I had to eat my own words, that I didn't have all the skills I thought I had in order to teach without the instrument. And then once I did, I was afraid to use it again. So needless to say, I finished 2 years of voice lessons, and I'm very grateful. It's a night and day difference. And I'm very grateful to hopefully audition and make an ensemble, or be singing for the joy of singing, and not just about classical repertoire, but engaging and immersing myself into jazz and other genres that I love to perform, and performing with others, and showing students that you can do this purely for joy, and I can love to teach, and I can use it to model,
Yeah, and I don't feel, and maybe I misunderstood you, I don't think that's in opposition to what we're sharing at all. I would further the point that I think my frustration is that the systems that certify public school teachers and are hiring, and it's different in every district, it's different in every campus. There are so many variables, but it bothers me that the assumption is you can just be a musician and therefore you can teach music. And to me, it's always been the opposite. Teaching whatever subject it is, that is a skill. Yeah. That is something you have to study and be able to do. And it is not inherent in being able to do the discipline. And it's weird to me because in other subjects, that conversation gets said a lot. If you are a mathematician, it doesn't mean you can teach math. If you are a chemist, it doesn't mean you can teach chemistry. Just because you have the content knowledge and skills and you're able to execute it at a proficient level, it doesn't mean that you know the pedagogy behind it. And that's what's always bothered me. One of my biggest pet peeves, I don't even want to say pet peeves, it really infuriates me, is you hear people, well, I'm going to go ahead and do the certification so I have something to fall back on. I will slap your mama. Like, I just don't understand this mentality. Teaching is not a fallback. It
No, it's not.
takes years to master it. You never really master it because the students are evolving. It is one of those
Yeah.
endless, hunts of I'm going to get to this point so that I can better understand the community I serve and better understand how to teach. And so I learned that through humility, through teaching for 3 years and trying to find my voice as an educator. And I consider myself a good teacher because I work at it. I'm not a good teacher because I got the degree or got the certification. There wasn't a finish line. I realized the reason I am an effective teacher is because I keep working at it and I have this drive and this passion. I gave up, playing for a long time, and I've been very grateful coming into higher ed. It's a part of my scholarship and service that I get to perform and teach, and I love that. I've practiced more and played more now than I ever did, and I'm so grateful for it. So I've had those humbling moments, but it's, to bring up the dirty cliche, those that can do and those that can't teach. And I've always told people it's the opposite. If you can, you do.
Yeah.
And if you are brave enough, you will try to teach other people how to do it. Because because this is the other thing that came to mind when you were talking about it are the horrid contradictions that exist in public education when it comes to these specialties. In that, when you meet I'm going to calm myself down. Because blood pressures get high.
Get
Because
hype. Get hype.
when you meet the choral educator or the orchestra director or the band director or the theater director, almost, 9 times out of 10, and I really don't think I'm exaggerating, they are in the professional world doing the thing. They are running a community chorus. They are playing in professional ensembles or in a string quartet. They're gigging regularly. They have a private studio. They're out there teching at the local theater company, whatever it is. 9 times out of 10, you poll a professional music educator and they teach and they're out there doing the thing because it's their passion, because they
Right.
want to be plugged in and be doing it. Go up to the chemistry department. Go up to the physics teacher and ask them if they practice physics outside of the classroom. Go to the English language arts teacher. Are they a professional author? Like, that expectation doesn't exist. Go to, hold on somebody, the football coach. They're not out on a field somewhere running around being a professional football player. So there's this incredible double standard that I think is the reason that you experienced some of that pressure. And I see D'Evan Johnson, a master of the music, an incredible musician,
Win.
who was saying that he had some of those similar struggles of, I don't want to give up being a musician because I'm a teacher. And I'm like, actually, the industry requires us to still be musicians.
Right.
My big argument is being a musician is not enough.
Right.
And we fool ourselves into thinking I'm going to be an incredible performer and that means I can go teach. And my friends, it's not true.
That was literally my mentality.
Yeah.
I knew that I didn't want that. I believe that performers, full-time performers, have a certain level of grit, and there's a persona that you have to have, and it's not about an attitude. Well, it is about a certain attitude, an attitude of I'm going to take this criticism, and I can decipher. I think of great singers like Celeste Morales. Like, I can decipher between criticism that is actually trying to lift me up and make me a better person, and you're just here to talk trash, and
Yes.
she can sleep at night, And I'm not saying that I know anyone's personal struggle with their identity as an artist, as
Yes.
a musician performing, but I will say, I know if somebody comes up to me and tells me that they think they know what's up with my voice, I'm like, you can find a hole and sleep. Don't tell me how I sing unless
Yeah.
you're my voice teacher, right? So you have to have that kind of gut. But I was like, I still sing great. I think I'm a good singer. I'm going in, I'm going to use it. And then when I didn't have it, I was like, what else do I do? So the voice heals. I know we're running short on time, but the voice heals. And then I go into year 3 and I remember looking down at this piece. I'm looking at the Ave Verum by Bird. And I think I can sing all of these lines within a healthy register. I can do this. I just don't know how to tell them how to do it.
Yeah.
Here's my bucket list. And this level of repertoire, this music demands that I know 10 more ways to get this point across. I don't know how to do it based on the time period. I don't know how to teach it the way that it would have been taught.
But wait, I want to stop you and challenge you because I think the important part, this is something I'm very passionate about. I take this from Mr. Stedman, a legendary biology teacher at San Marcos High School, just an extraordinary educator who had been an administrator and educator. When people asked him, "What do you teach?" he always responded, "Human beings."
Yes.
And I think to clarify your point, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think the repertoire told you that you needed to be able to teach it 10 more ways. It was the human beings in front of you.
Yeah.
And that's where people get lost is
Yeah.
you can be a great conductor, you can be, and I just a clarifying statement on my end, I am not diminishing any of my colleagues that teach in public school that hone their craft and are great educators, because I think in order to be a good teacher, you need to be a teacher. So I knew one of my very good friends that taught science and was in graduate school with me. She actually went out in the field and she worked in professional laboratories and then decided she wanted to come into public education and taught for several years and realized she didn't like it and then left and went back out in the field and started working in labs again. So it's not to diminish what people do with their careers or where their passions lie, but I want to just hammer the point home that you've made, that it's not enough to just be a musician. You have to be a teacher to go into education. And then once you're in there, you can be a teacher and a musician. You can do both.
And the further that I went in my time at North Shore, the more, my teaching philosophy was changing rapidly and quickly and getting more concise. And I actually have, if I could just, I'm not going to read it by no means, but I just want to see if I can flip it. I leave it out because it's part of my journey as I'm ending grad school, that I have here my original teaching philosophy in my first teaching portfolio that I had to make at Texas State, right? And I mean, I'm going in, right? And there are a lot, if not all of these dreams are still applicable. These are all things I still want to do. But if someone says, Cody, tell me your teaching philosophy now, I'm ready in one sentence. It is my life's purpose to touch as many lives through the vehicle of music.
Yes.
I am first and foremost an educator. I teach human beings, and I want to teach human beings how to be better human beings. And that means that I have to continue the desire to work on myself. I have to continue to build myself up and allow myself to be challenged by opposing thoughts. Just like Dr. Gonzalez at Texas State says, it's like, imagine if all pencils could just sharpen themselves through proximity. If we were together and just by being in each other's energy and our different thoughts, not about being all the same, we just sharpen and we become finer and finer points, right? So that was my thought. I'm like, what if I can just be around these students and they can be around me, and we, through music, using music, to get to the heart of our development, and then I send them off into the world, and here comes the next generation that should be getting an upgraded version of me every time. And when I realized that I could no longer be upgraded where I was, that by staying there, I would be serving a detriment to my students because I knew what I needed to do, it was time for me to go. And that's when I left. And now I'm hungry. I am hungry to go back and teach some kids and teach the youth,
Yeah, absolutely. That's so well said.
Thank you. Do it again.
I'm frustrated because we're at the end of our time.
All right. We can do a part 2 one day. I'm all about that.
We absolutely need to do a part 2 because I really want to address this conversation of diversity and equity.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to just mention, in context of the conversation we've had, I think we're starting to see that struggle articulated in a professional sense of diversity of who is in the classroom teaching. And this is beyond demographics. Did you do a traditional certification program? Are you still a practicing musician? Are you still, there is a diversity, a professional diversity that exists, but there, I think, from my perspective, there's still not an equity. There is a bias in terms of what resumes are looked at and how they're perceived, and there's an absolute bias that exists, and it's localized, it's cultural. And cultural in terms of like band, choir, orchestra, general music, like different things mean different things. It's just been fascinating to have the transitions in my life that I've had over the past few years and really start to see that, as you begin to advance your career and you start to meet new people and you see things and you kind of reflect on where you've been. Hindsight's always 20/20. You start to see these things to say, wow, there was a situation that I was in and I was unaware of the situation. right? And I was so focused on myself and trying to fix myself, but I didn't recognize the system that was in place and the situation that was going on. And I need to be wiser now to be able to recognize those warning signs or to celebrate healthy systems that I'm in.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And so to not say that I'm the reason I am successful, because none of us work independently. There is a whole series of things that's happening behind the scenes for us, positive and negative. And so I definitely want to connect with you again. I would argue to further that conversation, because we're talking about professional diversity, but to bring in the demographic piece and talk about the differentiation for our students' learning and all of that. I definitely want to bring you back, because that's a very important conversation that needs to be had.
Mm-hmm. And I have no regrets on the degree plan that I'm taking, or that I've had in choral conducting, which is very much focused on Western music. And I have learned the things that I have loved, and I've learned the things that I haven't loved. But I will say that it was not built in the research that I've done that very much looks like a music education degree.
Yeah.
So that's a conversation in itself that we could probably start with, is how the program worked with that, and how I was able to do this research, and how they really are one and the same.
Yes.
It's just a layer of each other, but how those conversations are now starting to happen, why they didn't happen, how long they haven't been happening, and what that might say for how we structure music programs from the ground up. It's very easy to also think that these conversations are doom and gloom, but they're not.
They're not.
They're only if you are intimidated at the aspect of change, and if
yes,
and often these things bother the soul that wants to stay in the status quo. And I guess I'll end with this conversation, or with this statement, is anytime it comes to yourself as an educator and obstacles that you're having, or whether it be equity, diversity, no matter what is the obstacle, and when you feel like you can't handle any more change or the upgrades, or there's too many new vocabulary words, you should first ask yourself, what are you holding on to? And in that reflection, it will lead to the first and foremost observation, which is yourself. You need to do a self check on your thoughts, on your beliefs, and how you interact with people around you. And then change can happen, because you've allowed yourself to be an open vessel.
Yes.
And even if I bring that back to the conversation that we had, I had to humble myself and say, girl, you don't know it all. You can't sing all the notes at everybody. What am I holding on to? I'm holding on to this idea that I'm a person that I really am not, and that I can pretend like I got all the knowledge I needed in undergrad, but you didn't. So humble yourself, be an open vessel, allow other educators to pour into you, so that maybe just one day, at minimum, you can be worthy to teach the kids in front of you.
Yes.
And I'm in a position now where there are educators who ask me for advice or resources, and I'm like, yes, like, I'm all about helping you, because I am still on the hunt for this knowledge as well.
Yeah.
So together, and it sometimes if I'm lucky, but more times than not, I get that same PBS fluffy feeling, except now I know how to fill out the Form 1, and now I know how to do attendance, and how to go to the professional development. I know how I learn. I know how to help other people as well.
If you will let me, I just want to sprinkle a little bit on top of that, because you really spoke to me in that the challenge is encouraging people to appreciate change.
Yeah.
And I'm going to say the big ugly A words, assessment and accountability, which always terrifies people in a professional scenario. And it's something I still struggle with in terms of what assessment accountability look like in the arts. But we're moving in every state across the nation to this growth model, and we keep talking about growth. And even more, that's what I just want to sprinkle on top, even more than challenging people to see, what are you holding on to? What are you afraid of losing in change? Or what are you afraid of changing that you will no longer have? Like, in that context, what really strikes me is that those difficult conversations that are so important to have, where you do recognize the deficits, or you do recognize where there is an opportunity for change or growth, they don't have to be punitive as long as you're in a growth mindset. Yeah. And without sounding like the PBS special, right? Without sounding like one of your PD books, right, that you get at the beginning of the year, like, what's the new gimmick that we're going to have? I'm talking about growth mindset in the sense that until you, now wait, hold on somebody, I'm going to get a little preachy. Until you know where you are, it's impossible to know what your growth looks like. And I think that's what people are afraid of, is when you do the self-evaluation, when you look at your program or your students or your teaching or whatever it is that you are interested in growing, you have to recognize where there is room for growth in order to grow. You have to say, here's what I'm doing right now, but I know this could be better. It's in that self-assessment, it's in that you build the trajectory, and you can say, here's how I know that I grew. It's because this is where I was, and I am no longer in that place. But the more that we avoid those conversations, and the more that we hesitate to say, you know what, my programming isn't diverse. I am still programming the stuff that I was taught was important music from when I was in school. I am playing the stuff that I played because it's safe and I know that it exists, and I'm worried about score study, or I'm worried about conducting a new pattern or exploring a new composer, or I don't know how to program diversity without it being cliche. I don't know how to program something and then say, we're going to do this music because it's a black female composer. No, friend, you're going to do the music because it's great music. And in spite of this person writing music as a black female composer in the 20th century, they were successful. And let's talk about the social historical context around that, which is one of your national standards, by the way. Like, let's bring all of that into the classroom, but let's celebrate great music because it's great music, and you know how to look for great music. And the context behind it, it just fuels the conversations. But until you start that conversation, until you start analyzing your programming or your repertoire, whatever it is, you will never experience growth. Here's the point. Even if you're growing, even if you start, programming different, and we're talking about programming, but whatever the case is, even if you start gigging more, you're developing as a musician, if you never had the conversation with yourself and others to say, here's where I am, you'll never recognize the growth, and you're doing yourself a greater disservice. Because I know extraordinary people that have completely transformed their lives and still beat themselves up for not being good enough. And I'm going, why didn't you recognize 2 years ago where you were? Because you're in a totally different place. But they never had that conversation to start to say, here's where I can grow.
And also having that conversation is a taught skill.
Yes.
And if they haven't been taught how to do that level of reflection, that's the other thing too. There's a lot of research in doing my own research on different content and stuff like that. I realized that a lot of it, and I'm telling you, this is a big can of worms that like we can dive into, but I'll just to give it like a surface level introduction. A lot of talk about diversity and equity, or like education and how to reform education, often comes from the narrative and an energy of like fire and brimstone.
Yeah.
Thanks for showing up to my TED Talk where I tell you this thing that you should be doing. Shame on you for not doing it already. Dang, they showed up.
Yeah.
People are showing up to the conversation. Thank you for coming to the conversation. You're going to be here a while. That's what they really should say.
Yes.
This is not just your growth as an educator, your growth with diverse repertoire, your ability to teach in a various areas, various states, various countries. It's a taught skill that takes time. It's a marathon.
Yeah.
Just like the situation we're in right now. This is a marathon. You got to think beyond what is going to just get you through the next assignment or through the next hurdle or the specific problem, and how not only you're going to get through this problem, but be prepared for future ones to come. And if you're not prepared, you know what to do.
Yes.
You know who to reach out with. You have a support system for yourself, let alone whatever program that you're working with. So that'll be an interesting conversation for us.
So I am holding you to it. We have witnesses. There must be a part 2. And we are going to get this on the calendar, because I love you so much, and I'm so grateful for your wisdom and experience and your articulation, your ability to just share what's going on in your life. And it is so rewarding as a humble witness to the incredible growth that you've had and the incredible things that you're doing and you continue to do. Every episode of Car Thoughts with Cody, like everything that you share into the world, you are so making it a better place, and I'm grateful to have you as a friend and a colleague. So I am going to finish today's session with the absolute promise that there will be a part two, because there
Yeah.
is so much more to be said, and I'm so grateful for this time. Thank you to everybody that was watching. Incredible people and friends that we all have. I'm so glad to see my students and some of our colleagues from Texas State, people that are out there teaching and making a difference in people's lives. So grateful for the time that you guys have shared with us today. This will be posted on YouTube. I have a playlist for all of our teacher talks, and I will make sure I share that link with you and post it on Facebook as well. Please make sure that you check in. I have a page for the Falcon Feathers on Facebook, and you can also just follow the YouTube channel if you want to look at that. I'm hesitant to say. From Texas. I'm hesitant to say like and subscribe. I'm trying to be careful to not do that, but I'm not.
Oh, you won't be that person?
I'm not in that place yet. I haven't gotten there yet. But do make sure that you follow it, because I want to make sure that you guys see the second part of this conversation and some of the other conversations that are happening. And most importantly, if you're available at this time, please make sure that you check. And there's some fantastic questions, comments you guys are posting, and I always want to share those. And if you have any ideas, things that you want to see us talking about, people that you want to see conversations with, please feel free to email me or reach out to me, and I will take all of that and try to make that happen as soon as possible. So thank you for everybody that's watching. Thank you again to the one and only Cody Raven Morris for having a conversation with us today. I will see you again, and I look forward to having all of you with us again as we have more teacher talks with incredible educators. Thank you guys for being here today.
Thanks, everybody.